Okay, so we're going to do this video for you DIY guys. Because a lot of you DIY guys are going to go to Princess Auto, or you're going to go to Harbor Freight, maybe even Amazon, and you're going to buy a 36-inch brake. Now a 20 gauge and anything below, it's perfect. And although it does say it will bend up to 12 gauge sheet metal, that's at 18 inches. Now it'll go up to, what is it? I think here we got, it doesn't have 18, but basically this is 18 gauge. And this is the piece we got to make. We got to make two of these for the 56 Chevy. That's the inner structure. That's where the inner wall comes down. That's the J channel at the bottom. Our new floor gets welded to this side. And that trench just sits there. That's just how they designed the car. Now when you bend with this, our first bend, we marked everything where we wanted it. We bent this one first. We were able to overbend it and it was okay. But this actually, when it came straight up, popped down. You'll see a lot of guys, they'll put a plate here and bolt it in or weld it on so that it can't move. Not a bad upgrade. Now these are 24 inches, 18 gauge, and it might be a little more than 18 gauge. I noticed when we get the 4x8 sheet, instead of a 3x5 or 3x4 or 2x4 sheet, they always seem to be thicker when they're a 4x8 sheet. At any rate, there's ways to get by. Now our first bend, we actually took the hammer. Most of it was good, but the middle had to go a little more. And we gently tapped it in. We repositioned it and did this bend. And the problem is, it's not quite 90. So we're going to take this little chunk of 2x4 and a hammer. I've already started doing the end. I'm going to lie it right in here and angle it up. And if you see it, it's slowly coming 90. Here it's still tipped down. You do gotta make sure you keep these in. You got to keep it from falling off this edge, of course. You could hit directly here, but sometimes it'll put marks in it and whatnot that you may not want. Now, another way of doing this is to put a flat bit on the end of your air hammer. And you just hold it in place. Turn the air down a little bit, not too crazy, just enough that you can run it across. It'll push up a lot easier, but most guys won't have that. And if you have the air chiseled, you'll have bits. But one of them flat ones is for kind of planishing. You likely won't have it. And where this is going, I'm just doing it by eye. If our 90's a little off, it ain't gonna matter. Use all your personal safety equipment. So you can see this end is pretty good until we get right here. You'll see how from about where my hand is this way, we're just going to lie this down flat, put the board on it, and knock that down. And I'm not going to waste your time showing you all that, but you get the idea. We could probably use this as a table. We'll keep this out flush. because if we have it in too far, it'll rub on here. We'll do it in live time. Why not, eh? Now when I hold this on this angle, as soon as this edge touches this, you'll hear the sound change. Now if this was a metal block, it would actually push it quicker, faster. But for what we're doing, this is perfect. This will go right in place where we need it to be. We've got a set. And we're going to measure our width here to here and here to here to make sure that's good. But just looking at both, I can see that this one looks a touch wider. Okay, so there's a bit of round, which means I'm gonna have to come right on this edge and hammer this edge down, and that'll shrink that down a little bit. She bent a little bit on the round side, but we want to get it as close as we can to what stock was, basically, because this welds inside the car. This comes up against the brand new one-piece floor. This is where it gets welded. So we want to make sure we don't make the car wider than it was. So I'll set that down like so, and I'll just knock this edge down for a couple of minutes. And that'll take care of it. I uploaded a video, I guess, a little earlier today, kind of explaining what we were playing with today. So we ground this off. We used our flange tool. You can see how that is inset in about the width of the steel. Now, until I cut this down, it's not going to fit. But we basically made this about that much longer. So we're going to have a little gap right there. There you go. And we're going to put our weld right in that gap. Now, this wasn't real flimsy, but a little bit. But as soon as we put this in, the whole thing has like a little Z in it. And it's a little more, like the whole thing will move instead of just part of it. And, you know, it takes the wobbly out. So sometimes just putting the flange in makes it strong. But when you put a flange in, you put this piece in, and as soon as you get your weld there, so you want to make sure you have a gap, just like butt welding. Not as important with the flange. As long as you go up that edge and weld it in, you're fine. But we're going to notch this corner out right there, and we're going to bend about 3/4 of an inch of that. We're just going to use our tong pliers, which is these right here. Pair of vice grips. These guys here, I think it's like a 3 or 4 inch tong on there. So what we'll do, we'll notch 3/4 of an inch of this off, and we'll bite it at about 1/2 inch, and then we'll kind of manipulate it, because if you look in here, it's not a perfect 90, it's a little bit round. We'll try to mimic that close, so it comes right around, and we're just going to buzz right here, right on top. This panel goes on top of a panel here, so there's a low spot. So if it fits in, like, it'll be good enough for what we're doing. We can always do some filler work if we want, but none of this will be exposed. This will be buried. This will be buried all behind the interior. And once we have that fit, in order to allow it to fall in, once I check that width against this width right here, because this right here is exactly where that needs to be. So we're going to cut this here, and we're going to cut that piece to match. We might just put it here, but we can always manipulate this in a bit. The same back here. Should we have made this piece too wide? That's why we left, even though this was all bad and it's got to be cut out, that's part of why we left some of this in place. So I can go from this And if our piece sticks out, even if it's just a 1/16 outward, we can knock this in and adjust the bottom of our piece in a little bit. So even if it comes in a bit, no one will ever notice that. And the same back here. Whatever we do here, we're going to have to kind of guesstimate back here, but we won't weld this yet. We'll just weld the top. That way, when we drop this on the floor will push it to where it has to go if it's a touch wide. And if it's a touch short, like in this way, you clamp the two with vice grips and it'll pull it that little bit. Like, as long as you're as close as you can possibly get, this should work. But if I put that like so, hang on, right against it, you see, if I were to, I can't put the back in for obvious reasons, but you can see how they're both going to line right up. Now this is bent in a touch, and we left it on top, but right here we'll go right on top, leave a little gap right here in the corner, and we'll just weld that right down this edge. And we'll come in here later with a burring tool. We'll just eat out everything that's soft till it gets hard. We'll make a little piece, and we'll try to weld it in there. We can get behind it if we have to, because it doesn't seem to be all rotten. It just seems to have that spot right there. But if it is bad, it'll just eat out real easy with the burring tool. And you can even try to weld something like that shut. And people go cold. Run your welder as cold as you can. Give yourself some distance. And what that'll do is it won't burn through. But I'm going to tell you to do it the other way. Turn your welder up a touch more than you're comfortable with, and then try to weld it. And if it burns some stuff away, burn it away. Go back until it stops, and then you know you've hit hard metal. I'd rather have a bigger hole to fix that's solid than we're just going to plug this up and it looks good, but it just rusts because it's so thin, right? And once you've hit it with the heat, the thin rusty metal's going to be worse. Another thing you can do if you're really picky, you can cut this right out and try to remake this whole piece. But this is like, it's not pitted in the back side, it's just whatever that spot is. So when we cut this junk out, we can cut that edge off the bottom here. But our new piece will go over this, so we can weld right in here. But that right there, like I say, because of where it is, I'll probably just blast a deburring tool in here and hone it out. Make a little round piece I can jam up in here behind it, and just buzz it in. And I mean, if there's a little bit of a weirdness in here, as long as the rubber will still fit, we don't care. Like, there's places where you got to be really selective and other places where you don't have to be. Now, if you want to look at this side, same thing, same part, same piece. For some reason on this side, it seemed to be a little bit bigger. So the other one that I was going to hammer narrower, I may not. Because when I look at this, it's hard for you to see on camera, or at least hard for me to get it. On this side, it really is a little bit fatter, which is kind of weird. So what I'll do though is I'll hammer the other one down till it matches this one. We're just going to run it across, you know, put it somewhere on a hard steel surface, and just keep knocking this down on one side, and then the other side. That'll shrink it a little bit. I'd rather make them both the same because they were pretty accurate. And like I say, we can manipulate this in and out a little bit to our floor. The main thing is, as long as when we do our rockers, that's when we'll weld the edges so that it'll all line up together, because we want to make sure when we open and close our door, we didn't pull this in or push it out. So before we weld, we will weld our pieces on, but before we weld this edge to the floor, we'll put our doors on, make sure it's all going to work out. Thanks for watching. Cheers.